Hello, high society. Tonight, we're going to pull back the velvet curtain on a scandal that shook the coast of Marbella. A betrayal so audacious, it redefined the meaning of friendship and loyalty. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a story. It's a lesson splattered across tabloids and whispered in the most exclusive country clubs. This is the saga of Laura Rios, a woman who had it all, lost it all, and then, in the most unexpected and spectacular way, got it all back. Buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride. Like this video, share this incredible story, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the most shocking life stories. The fairy tale faded. Laura Rios had always believed in fairy tales, perhaps because her own life, for a time, had felt like one. From her humble beginnings in a small town in the interior of Spain, she had made her way into the heart of Marcos Torres, a man whose name was synonymous with innovation, wealth, and power. Marcos, the scion of Torres Industries, had built a technology empire from scratch, a testament to his relentless intellect and unyielding ambition. Their whirlwind romance culminated in a wedding that was featured in the pages of Vogue, a lavish event at his immense estate in Soto Grande. Laura, with her radiant smile and genuine warmth, was the perfect counterpoint to Marcos's often stoic demeanor. She became Mrs. Torres, the elegant hostess, the devoted wife, the woman who effortlessly navigated the shark-infested waters of Madrid's elite. For 10 years, their life together was a dazzling spectacle. Private jets whisked them away to exotic locations, skiing in the Sierra Nevada, sailing in the Mediterranean, safaris in Doñana National Park. Their penthouse in Madrid offered panoramic views of the city skyline, a shining testament to their success. Laura managed their multiple residences with a velvet glove over an iron fist, her impeccable taste evident in every antique and every commissioned work of art. She was the envy of many, the silent force behind Marcos's public persona. She genuinely loved him, or at least she loved the man she thought he was. Ambitious, yes, but also kind, thoughtful, and deeply committed to their shared future. They talked of having children, of growing old together, of building a legacy that transcended mere financial success. Her closest confidant throughout it all was Clara Morales. Clara, a striking brunette with a sharp wit and an uncanny ability to make Laura laugh even in the most stressful situations, had been Laura's college roommate. Their friendship was a solid foundation, an anchor in the often superficial world Laura now inhabited. Clara was a struggling artist when Laura met Marcos, but through Laura's connections, she had secured gallery representation, and her career had slowly begun to flourish. Laura never saw it as anything but helping a friend. Clara was practically family, a constant presence in their lives. She was at every dinner party, every Christmas gathering, a regular presence at their estate in Marbella, often staying for weeks at a time. Marcos even commissioned several pieces from Clara for his corporate offices, a gesture that Laura saw as generous and supportive. The first cracks in Laura's perfect facade were almost imperceptible, like fine fractures in a flawless diamond. Marcos, always busy, became increasingly distant. Late nights at the office turned into entire weekends away, justified by urgent deals in Tokyo or London. His once attentive gaze now seemed to slide past her, preoccupied. He would dismiss her concerns with a wave of his hand, a curt comment about the pressures of his empire. Laura, always the understanding wife, tried to be patient. She told herself it was just a phase, the relentless demands of his world. She redoubled her efforts to make their home a sanctuary, to plan romantic dinners, to surprise him with thoughtful gestures. But his responses were increasingly superficial, his affection measured. Then came the little things, the anomalies, that began to prick at Laura's subconscious. A faint, unfamiliar scent on his shirts that wasn't her perfume. A cryptic text message that flashed on his phone screen before he quickly pocketed it. The way he suddenly started taking calls in another room, his voice lowered. Laura, a woman who prided herself on her intuition, felt a cold dread begin to slither into her heart. She dismissed it as paranoia, the insecurities of a wife whose husband was too successful, too handsome, too desirable for his own good. But the feeling persisted, a persistent hum of unease. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the illusion shattered. Marcos had claimed to be in Barcelona for an emergency meeting. Laura, feeling restless, decided to visit her favorite boutique on Serrano Street. As she stepped out of her chauffeured car, she saw them. Marcos Torres, her husband of 10 years, walking hand in hand with Clara Morales, her best friend, toward a discreet luxury jeweler. The laughter bubbling from Clara's lips, the way Marcos's arm was wrapped possessively around her, the undeniable intimacy of their posture. It hit Laura with a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The air left her lungs. Her meticulously constructed reality imploded in a single, gut-wrenching moment. She stood there, frozen, watching them emerge. Clara's hand was now adorned with a gleaming diamond ring that dwarfed Laura's own engagement ring. They shared a private joke, a tender kiss, before disappearing into a waiting black car. Laura didn't need to hear the words. The scene spoke for itself. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that it stole her breath away. It wasn't just her husband's infidelity. It was a friend's treachery, a double cross that wounded her to the core of her being. The fairy tale had become a nightmare, and the princess was left bleeding on the pavement, her golden cage now an iron trap. What would you do if you discovered a betrayal of this magnitude? Would you fight, or would you crumble? That night, Marcos came home whistling a cheerful tune. He found Laura in the library, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. A printout from the jeweler's online catalog zoomed in on an engagement ring identical to the one on Clara's finger, was clutched in her trembling hand. The silence in the room was deafening, thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter taste of deceit. The confrontation was brutal, swift, and completely devoid of remorse on Marcos's part. He admitted everything with a clinical coldness, as if he were discussing a business merger. He was leaving her for Clara. He had been cheating for months. He even had the audacity to suggest that Laura should have seen it coming, that they had simply grown apart. Laura, reeling from the emotional devastation, found herself on the edge of the abyss. The divorce proceedings were a blur of legal jargon and public humiliation. Marcos, ever the master manipulator, leaked stories to the press, painting Laura as a demanding, materialistic wife who had failed to appreciate his genius. The tabloids, sensing blood in the water, feasted on the scandal. "The Torres Ice Queen, abandoned for an artistic muse," one headline screamed. "Billionaire's new love, from best friend to fiancé," another declared. Laura, once the darling of society, became a pariah, ostracized by many of her former friends who now flocked to Clara, eager to curry favor with the new queen bee. Her financial settlement, while substantial by any normal standard, was a pittance compared to Marcos's vast fortune, deliberately structured to tie up his assets in long-term trusts and complex investments, leaving her with significant liquid capital, but still a fraction of what she deserved. He made sure she kept the Marbella estate, a final cruel gesture, knowing the place was steeped in memories that would now only serve to torment her. The golden cage had been opened, but Laura was left alone, bruised, broken, and with a hollow ache where her heart used to be. The world she had so meticulously built had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but shattered dreams and the bitter taste of betrayal. And as the dust settled, a new emotion began to beat beneath the surface of her grief, a quiet rage that would, in time, ignite a firestorm no one saw coming. The ashes and the rise. The Marbella estate, once a vibrant hub of dazzling parties and intimate gatherings, now felt like a mausoleum. Laura walked its hallowed halls, each room a ghost of happier times, each antique a reminder of a life that no longer existed. The sprawling gardens, meticulously manicured by a team of dedicated gardeners, offered no solace. Every rose seemed to mock her, every blooming hydrangea a testament to a beauty she no longer felt within herself. She was adrift, lost in a sea of grief and anger, the betrayal a constant throbbing wound. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Laura barely ate, barely slept. Her usually flawless appearance gave way to unkempt hair and haunted eyes. Her closest friends, the ones who hadn't abandoned her in the wake of the scandal, tried to reach out, but she pushed them away. She couldn't bear their pity. She couldn't articulate the depth of her pain. How could she explain that the two people she had loved and trusted most in the world had conspired to dismantle her life? Then, one crisp autumn morning, as Laura sat by the window overlooking the stormy Atlantic, a small, almost imperceptible, shift occurred within her. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany, but rather a slow and steady flicker of defiance. She saw her reflection in the glass, a pale, haggard woman, a shadow of her former self. And in that moment, a quiet voice inside her whispered, "Is this all you are now? A victim?" The very thought was a jolt, a cold splash of water on her numb spirit. No, she was Laura Rios, a woman who had built her own success before Marcos, a woman with intelligence, resilience, and a quiet strength that had been overshadowed by the dazzle of his world. She realized she had allowed herself to be defined by him, by their marriage, by the trappings of his wealth. Now, stripped of all of it, she had an opportunity to redefine herself, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The first step was small. She took a shower, something she hadn't done with care in days. She put on a clean dress, brushed her hair, and applied a touch of lipstick. Then she walked to the grand kitchen, once the domain of her private chef, and made herself a simple meal. It tasted like ashes, but it was a beginning. Over the next few weeks, Laura began the slow and arduous process of rebuilding. She hired a team of lawyers to re-examine her divorce settlement, dissecting every clause, every trust, every carefully hidden loophole Marcos had created. She met with financial advisors, not just to manage her existing assets, but to strategize, to understand the intricate dance of the market. She was no longer content to be a passive recipient. She wanted to be an active player. She also started exercising, initially just long walks on the beach, the salty air a balm to her soul. Slowly, she progressed to intense Pilates and yoga sessions. The physical exertion was a release, a way to channel the anger and frustration that still churned beneath the surface. As her body grew stronger, so did her mind. The fog of despair began to lift, replaced by a clarity of purpose. But the most significant change occurred when she stumbled upon a small, dusty box in the attic. Inside, tucked away among old photographs and forgotten mementos, was a collection of her grandmother's recipes. Her grandmother, a formidable woman who had run a successful bakery in their hometown, had instilled in Laura a love for baking, a passion that had been relegated to a hobby once she entered Marcos's world. As Laura leafed through the handwritten cards, the scent of cinnamon and vanilla seemed to waft from the pages, conjuring memories of warmth and comfort. A spark was ignited. Laura remembered the joy she used to find in creation, in the tactile satisfaction of flour on her hands, the alchemy of simple ingredients transforming into something delicious. She began to bake, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. She experimented with old recipes, adding her own sophisticated twists, incorporating exotic flavors she had discovered during her travels. The process was therapeutic, a quiet rebellion against the desolation that had threatened to consume her. The word of her exquisite pastries, initially shared with her loyal staff and a handful of close friends, began to spread. "You have to try Laura's macarons," a friend whispered at a charity lunch. "Her tarts are divine," another raved. Laura, at first hesitant, found herself considering a path she never imagined. Could this be more than just a hobby? Could it be a new beginning? Around this time, a mutual acquaintance, a shrewd businesswoman named Samantha, Sam Hernandez, approached Laura. Sam, a venture capitalist with a keen eye for untapped potential, had watched Laura's public downfall with a mixture of sympathy and intrigue. She saw past the tabloid headlines, recognizing Laura's innate intelligence and resilience. "Laura," Sam said over a discreet lunch, "I know what you've been through. It's truly awful, but I also see something more. I see a woman with incredible taste, a discerning palate, and an ambition that has been dormant for too long. Have you ever considered turning your passion into a business?" Laura was stunned. The idea had been a whispered fantasy, too fragile to fully articulate. But hearing it from Sam, a woman who built empires, made it seem real, tangible. They talked for hours, discussing concepts, market niches, and sketching out business plans on linen napkins. Sam saw the potential for a luxury bakery, not just a shop, but an experience. A brand built on Laura's impeccable style and her exquisite creations. "We'll call it La Cuchara Dorada, the golden spoon," Sam proposed. "A nod to your past, but a symbol of your future." With Sam's guidance and a significant investment of her own capital, Laura plunged into this new venture with a ferocity that surprised even herself. She leased a charming historical building in Puerto Banús, transforming it into a chic, minimalist space that exuded understated elegance. She meticulously sourced the finest ingredients, from rare Madagascar vanilla beans to artisan French butter. She hired a small team of skilled pastry chefs and bakers who shared her passion for perfection. The launch of La Cuchara Dorada was a quiet affair, deliberately low-key, avoiding the kind of fanfare that had once defined her life with Marcos. But the word spread quickly. The quality of her confections was undeniable, the presentation exquisite. Society flocked to her door, not out of pity, but out of a genuine appreciation for her artistry. La Cuchara Dorada became Marbella's most exclusive bakery. Its delights graced the tables of the most discerning hostesses. Laura, once the discarded wife, was now a respected businesswoman, with a success that was entirely her own. As La Cuchara Dorada flourished, Laura also found an unexpected solace in her work. The precise measurements, the delicate techniques, the focus required to create culinary masterpieces. It was all a distraction from the persistent pain, a channel for her newfound energy. She found a quiet satisfaction in building something from scratch, something that was unequivocally hers. However, beneath the surface of her burgeoning success, a flicker of resentment remained. It wasn't a consuming fire, but a persistent ember. Marcos and Clara were now the golden couple, their engagement announced with great fanfare, their upcoming wedding promised to be the social event of the year. Laura would see glimpses of them in society magazines. Clara, now sleek and polished, dressed in designer clothes, her artistic career magically skyrocketing under Marcos's patronage. The sheer injustice of it all, the blatant disregard for Laura's feelings, occasionally flared up. But Laura had learned to channel that anger not toward self-destruction, but toward fuel. She realized her greatest revenge would not be a public spectacle or a bitter confrontation, but success achieved on her own terms, a quiet triumph that spoke louder than any shouting accusation. She was rebuilding her life not just for herself, but for something more, something that was still a secret, a delicate hope that was blooming in the fertile ground of her new independence. The future, once a desolate wasteland, now held a tantalizing promise, a plan that was slowly forming in the quiet corners of her mind, a plan that would finally bring her back to Marcos and Clara, but this time on her own formidable terms, the secret and the sweetest revenge. Amidst the demanding schedule of building her empire, Laura found herself facing a revelation that was profoundly personal and completely unexpected. For weeks, a shift in her body had been nagging at her, a persistent fatigue that she attributed to the long hours and a fleeting nausea she blamed on stress. But deep down, a whisper of intuition, a quiet certainty, began to grow. One rainy afternoon, driven by an instinct she couldn't ignore, Laura made a discreet appointment with a gynecologist in a neighboring town, far from the prying eyes of the Marbella gossip circles. The results, delivered in a soft, almost apologetic tone, hit Laura like a tsunami. She was pregnant. Not just pregnant, but expecting quadruplets. The words resonated in the sterile examination room, an improbable, miraculous, and terrifying pronouncement. In the immediate aftermath, Laura was consumed by a kaleidoscope of emotions. A deep, overwhelming joy surged through her, a sense of awe at the miracle unfolding within her. But intertwined with this euphoria was a piercing fear. She was alone, truly alone. No partner, no husband, just her and 4 tiny lives completely dependent on her. The image of Marcos and his careless betrayal flashed before her eyes. The thought of bringing 4 children into the world without a stable, loving co-parent was daunting, to say the least. Her first instinct was to call Sam. Sam, ever the pragmatic one, listened intently, her usual sharp wit softened by genuine concern. "Laura, this is a lot, but you are strong, and you are not alone. We will figure this out together," she told her. Sam's unwavering support was a lifeline, a reminder that Laura had built a new, loyal network around herself. The next challenge was how to navigate this monumental news publicly. Laura, fiercely protective of her privacy and still smarting from the tabloid frenzy of her divorce, decided to keep her pregnancy a secret. She confided the truth only to Sam and her most trusted assistants. Her expanding belly was cleverly concealed with flowing dresses and strategically placed layers, explained by a new, relaxed style as La Cuchara Dorada's success continued to grow. She became a master of misdirection, a magician of disorientation. The pregnancy, especially with quadruplets, was demanding. The morning sickness, once fleeting, became a constant companion. The fatigue was relentless. Yet Laura found a strength she never knew she possessed. Every kick, every flutter, every ultrasound image of her growing babies fueled her determination. They were now her purpose, her reason to fight, her ultimate victory. She meticulously planned every detail of their arrival. A discreet maternity nurse was hired. A trusted pediatrician was consulted. She renovated a wing of the Marbella estate, transforming it into a luxurious but practical nursery, suitable for 4. The whispers of society, still focused on the impending nuptials of Marcos and Clara, provided the perfect smokescreen. No one suspected that Laura Rios, the ice queen who had been so publicly discarded, was about to embark on the most profound journey of her life. Meanwhile, Marcos and Clara's wedding preparations were in full swing. The society pages were filled with details: the exclusive Canary Islands resort they had booked, the designer gown Clara would wear, the list of celebrity guests. Their love story, once a scandalous whisper, was now celebrated as a triumph of true love over a suffocating marriage. Laura would see the glossy photos, the radiant faces, and a familiar pang of hurt would twist in her gut. But the pain was different now. It was no longer just heartbreak. It was a steely resolve, a quiet determination to protect her unborn children from the same man who had so carelessly broken her heart. As her due date approached, Laura decided to temporarily withdraw from public life, citing exhaustion from the business expansion. She secluded herself at the estate, surrounded by her small, loyal team, eagerly awaiting her children's arrival. The birth, complicated but ultimately successful, brought 4 healthy babies into the world. 3 girls, Charlotte, Isabella, and Genevieve, and 1 boy, Theodore. Laura, upon holding them for the first time, felt an outpouring of love so vast, so all-encompassing, that it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal of the past. These perfect little beings were her future, her legacy, her greatest accomplishment. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights, countless feedings, and an overwhelming surge of maternal devotion. Laura, despite her wealth and the help she employed, was a hands-on mother, determined to nurture her children herself. She sang them lullabies, read them stories, and delighted in every coo and gurgle. La Cuchara Dorada continued to prosper under Sam's watchful eye and Laura's remote guidance, but her babies were her primary focus. As the quadruplets approached their first birthday, robust and full of vibrant energy, a date began to loom in Laura's mind: Marcos and Clara's wedding day. The invitations had gone out months ago, a stark reminder of the culmination of their betrayal. Laura had initially planned to ignore it, to spend the day showering her children with love, far from the noise of the celebration. But as the date drew near, a different idea began to take root. An audacious plan, born not of malice, but of a fierce desire to reclaim her narrative, to stand tall and undeniably present in a world that had tried to erase her. She discussed it with Sam, laying out her vision with a calm precision that belied the audacity of the scheme. Sam, after an initial gasp of disbelief, broke into a wide, approving grin. "Laura Rios," she declared, "you are truly magnificent. This isn't just revenge, it's a masterpiece." The plan was simple, yet brilliant in its execution. It was not about causing a scene or shouting accusations or making a public spectacle of herself. It was about presence, about making an undeniable, unforgettable statement without uttering a single word. It was about revealing her truth, her ultimate triumph, in the most unexpected and memorable way possible. The world had watched her fall, had witnessed her public humiliation. Now they would watch her rise, not just as a successful businesswoman, but as a formidable mother, a woman who had quietly and powerfully built a new life, a new family, from the ashes of the old. The stage was set, the players in place. The grand finale was about to unfold. the grand finale. The wedding day of Marcos Torres and Clara Morales dawned crisp and clear in the Canary Islands. The chosen resort, a secluded paradise of white sand beaches and swaying palm trees, buzzed with the excitement of the year's most anticipated high society event. Every detail was meticulously planned, from the rare orchids flown in from Thailand to the custom-designed gown Clara would wear, a creation that had been featured in Vogue Brides. The guests, a who's who of international finance, tech, and entertainment, arrived in private jets, their faces flushed with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and expensive champagne, a brilliant picture of wealth and privilege. Marcos, looking impeccably handsome in a tailored linen suit, moved through the ceremony, mingling with a confident ease, a satisfied smile on his lips. He was at the pinnacle of his life, financially richer than ever, about to marry the woman he claimed was his soulmate, and having seemingly eradicated all traces of his past marriage. Clara, radiant and glowing, was the picture of a blushing bride, her once struggling artistic career now magically flourishing under her future husband's golden touch. They were the perfect power couple, their narrative carefully crafted for public consumption, a love that overcame obstacles, a testament to fate. Meanwhile, back in Marbella, Laura was the picture of serenity, a stark contrast to the storm that had raged within her for the past year. Her quadruplets, now nearly a year old, were dressed in adorable custom-made ivory outfits, soft linen for the girls' dresses, a tiny suit for Theodore, all designed to be comfortable yet elegant. Laura herself wore a stunning, understated ivory silk gown. Its flowing lines expertly concealed any lingering trace of her recent pregnancy, her hair styled in soft waves, her makeup minimal but flawless. She exuded an aura of quiet power, a woman completely at peace with herself and her formidable purpose. The plan was set, not for disruption, not for confrontation, simply for presence, an undeniable, unforgettable presence. As the ceremony was about to begin, guests were ushered toward the stunning oceanfront gazebo, adorned with thousands of white roses. The soft chords of a string quartet filled the air. Marcos stood at the altar, a confident smile on his face, his eyes scanning the gathering for Clara. The moment was perfect, cinematic, exactly as he had orchestrated it. Then a subtle shift occurred. A murmur of whispers began to spread among the guests. Heads turned not toward the aisle where Clara was meant to appear, but toward the main entrance of the resort, usually reserved for arrivals. A hush fell over the crowd, a collective gasp. A sleek black limousine silently glided into view, pulling to a precise stop at the edge of the red carpet leading to the gazebo. It wasn't just any limousine. It was the kind reserved for heads of state or top-tier celebrities, exuding an undeniable aura of importance. The uniformed chauffeur, looking impeccably professional, got out and opened the back door, and then she emerged. Laura Rios. She stepped out with an elegance that defied description, her ivory silk gown glowing softly in the Caribbean sun. She moved with a confidence that seemed to anchor the very air around her. Her gaze was direct, unwavering, sweeping over the stunned faces of the guests, many of whom she had once called friends. Her mere presence would have been enough to cause a sensation, to halt the proceedings. But Laura was not alone. As she turned, the chauffeur carefully helped two nannies, also impeccably dressed, out of the limousine. And in their arms, cradled against their chests, were two of her quadruplets, tiny bundles of ivory and innocence. Then Laura herself reached in, and with practiced ease, lifted out the other two. 4 babies, identical in their exquisite outfits, their eyes wide and curious, nestled securely in the arms of their formidable mother and her trusted companions. The collective gasp from the guests was almost audible. A wave of disbelief, then shock, then a flurry of whispered exclamations swept through the gathering. The flashes of hidden paparazzi, always lurking at such events, began to pop, capturing the surreal scene. Marcos, standing at the altar, his triumphant smile frozen on his face, watched in horror as Laura, holding two of his children, his own flesh and blood, began to walk slowly and deliberately down the red carpet. His face drained of color, his jaw clenched, his carefully constructed composure crumbled before the eyes of everyone he knew. The shock was so profound, so utterly unexpected, that it left him speechless. Clara, who had just appeared at the beginning of the aisle, resplendent in her designer gown, her face alight with bridal bliss, saw Laura and the babies, and her smile vanished. Her eyes widened in a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. The color drained from her face. Her carefully applied makeup suddenly looked harsh against her pallor. The moment she had dreamed of, the culmination of her manipulative plan, was being irrevocably hijacked by Laura's undeniable presence and four very persuasive truths. Laura didn't say a word. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked with calm dignity, her head held high, the four babies a testament to a truth Marcos had tried to erase, a future he had unknowingly helped to create. She stopped halfway down the aisle, close enough for everyone to see, to witness. She didn't look at Marcos or Clara directly. Her gaze swept over the guests, a silent and powerful statement. She was here. She was thriving. And these children, his children, were the living proof of a new life, a new beginning, born from the very ashes of his betrayal. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft cooing of one of the babies and the distant lapping of waves. It was a silence filled with unspoken questions, with dawning comprehension, with the profound shock of an event that defied all expectations. The perfect wedding, the carefully curated narrative, had just been irrevocably shattered by the uninvited guest and her four very persuasive arguments. The legacy and the closure. The wedding ceremony, it goes without saying, did not proceed as planned. Laura's arrival with the quadruplets had thrown the entire event into disarray. The guests, a mix of awe and scandal etched on their faces, murmured among themselves. Some pointed, others gasped, and others discreetly, or not so discreetly, took out their phones, snapping photos and videos of the unfolding drama. Marcos, still frozen at the altar, and Clara, completely mortified, finally mustered the courage to retreat from the aisle, their dream wedding dissolving before their eyes. Laura, having made her powerful and silent statement, turned gracefully and, with her nannies, began to walk back toward the waiting limousine. She didn't linger. She didn't gloat. Her mission was accomplished. As she reached the car, she finally allowed her gaze to meet Marcos's, for a brief instant. There was no anger in it, no triumph, only a quiet and profound understanding of the truth that now stood between them, undeniable and irrefutable. It was a look that said, "You chose your path, and I chose mine, and this is my path." The limousine door closed silently, and the sleek vehicle pulled away, leaving behind a whirlwind of speculation, shock, and utter chaos. Within minutes, the news exploded. The paparazzi, initially focused on the celebrity guests, had captured every frame of Laura's dramatic entrance. Social media accounts, typically filled with curated posts of happy couples and lavish events, were now dominated by blurry photos and frantic captions. Billionaire's ex crashes wedding with quadruplets. Marcos Torres's secret babies revealed. The wedding nightmare of Clara Morales. The story went viral faster than any tech launch Marcos had ever orchestrated. Back at the estate, Laura settled her babies into their car seats. She ensured they were comfortable and fed, seemingly unfazed by the global sensation she had just ignited. Sam, who had been orchestrating the media response from afar, called her, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and awe. "Laura, you broke the internet. It's everywhere. Marcos's PR team is in full damage control mode, but it's too late. The world knows." Laura simply smiled, a genuine and serene smile. "Good," she said softly. "The truth often is. Now, let's get these little ones home." The aftermath for Marcos and Clara was a public relations nightmare of epic proportions. Their carefully crafted narrative of true love was shattered, replaced by accusations of infidelity, abandonment, and deceit. Marcos's business reputation, usually unassailable, took a significant hit as investors questioned his judgment and ethics. Torres Industries' stock price fell, and angry shareholders demanded answers. Clara's artistic career, which had been artificially inflated by Marcos's connections, suddenly came under intense scrutiny. Galleries began to distance themselves, and commissions evaporated. She was no longer seen as a talented artist, but as a scheming opportunist, the woman who betrayed her best friend. The social circles that had once embraced her now ostracized her. Whispers of homewrecker and traitor followed her everywhere. Marcos, enraged and humiliated, immediately launched a legal assault, attempting to demand paternity tests and gain custody, or at least control, of the quadruplets. But Laura was prepared. She had meticulously documented every step of her pregnancy, every doctor's visit, every ultrasound. Her legal team, formidable and well-funded thanks to her success with La Cuchara Dorada, quickly countered his moves. The paternity tests, when they were performed, confirmed what Laura already knew. Marcos Torres was, in fact, the biological father of Charlotte, Isabella, Genevieve, and Theodore. The undeniable scientific proof made his attempts at denial futile. The court proceedings, though private, became a media frenzy. Laura, through her lawyers and a carefully managed public statement, revealed the full truth, that Marcos had abandoned her while she was unknowingly pregnant, that he had callously cast aside her and their marriage for Clara. She did not seek alimony or more financial gain. Her focus was solely on securing her children's well-being and the acknowledgement of their paternity. She simply wanted Marcos to own up to his responsibility, both legal and moral. The judge, clearly swayed by Laura's dignified demeanor and the irrefutable evidence, awarded Laura full custody of the children, with Marcos having supervised visitation rights. It was a crushing blow to his pride and his carefully constructed image as a benevolent patriarch. He was ordered to pay substantial child support, not just for the quadruplets, but also for the security, education, and specialized care their unique situation required. The court effectively took away the illusion of control he had always so desperately clung to. The public narrative shifted dramatically. Laura, once the scorned ex-wife, was now hailed as a survivor, a strong, independent woman who had overcome immense adversity and built a new life for herself and her children. La Cuchara Dorada became even more successful, with sales soaring as people rallied behind Laura. She even launched a line of organic baby food, Las Cucharitas de Oro, the little golden spoons, that quickly became a bestseller. Clara, on the other hand, virtually disappeared from public life. Her betrayal was too profound, her fall from grace too spectacular. The weight of her actions, along with the public condemnation, proved to be too much. Her relationship, built on deceit, quickly crumbled under the intense pressure. Marcos, seeing his empire threatened and his reputation in tatters, began to resent Clara, blaming her for the catastrophic consequences. The fairy tale they had so carefully constructed for themselves dissolved into a bitter, contentious mess. As for Laura, she found a deep peace. Her life was no longer defined by Marcos Torres, but by her children, by her thriving business, and by her own quiet strength. She had not sought revenge out of malice, but out of a need for truth, for justice, and for an undeniable acknowledgement of her new reality. She had transformed pain into power, and betrayal into purpose. The ultimate victory was not just in exposing Marcos and Clara, but in reclaiming her own narrative, in forging a new path, and in building a beautiful, fulfilling life for herself and her 4 precious miracles. The saga of Laura Rios had come full circle, not with a bang, but with the quiet, powerful force of a woman who had found her true worth and had brought 4 beautiful lives into the world as a testament to her unyielding resilience. The years that followed the disastrous non-wedding of Marcos and Clara were a testament to Laura's unyielding resilience and her shrewd business acumen. The initial media frenzy eventually subsided, but the public's fascination with Laura and her quadruplets remained. She handled it all with grace and dignity, carefully curating her public image to focus on her thriving business and her devotion to her children rather than dwelling on past grievances. She gave selective interviews, always emphasizing the importance of independence, self-worth, and the joy of motherhood. La Cuchara Dorada continued its meteoric rise. What started as a local Marbella bakery expanded into a national luxury brand. Laura, with the continued guidance of Sam Hernandez, strategically opened flagship stores in major cities like Madrid, Barcelona, and Bilbao. Her line of organic baby food, Las Cucharitas de Oro, became a household name, trusted by discerning parents who admired Laura's story and her commitment to quality. She launched cookbooks, hosted cooking shows, and even started a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers pursuing entrepreneurship. Laura Rios was no longer just Marcos Torres' ex-wife. She was a formidable businesswoman, a celebrated author, and a respected philanthropist in her own right. Her Marbella estate, once a painful reminder of her past, was transformed into a bustling, joyful home. Charlotte, Isabella, Genevieve, and Theodore grew into vibrant, intelligent children, each with their own distinct personality, but all sharing their mother's quiet determination and radiant smile. Laura ensured they had a stable and loving environment, shielded from the worst of the media attention, but also taught them the importance of kindness, integrity, and hard work. She was a hands-on mother, juggling board meetings with bedtime stories, culinary creations with school plays. Marcos Torres, on the other hand, found himself in a slow and agonizing decline. His reputation never fully recovered from the wedding scandal. The public saw him as a man who abandoned his pregnant wife and his children, a perception that severely damaged his carefully cultivated image as a brilliant and ethical business leader. Torres Industries, while still a powerful entity, lost some of its luster, struggling to regain investor confidence. Strategic partnerships dissolved, and key talents left for the competition. He and Clara eventually married in a quiet, unceremonious ceremony, a far cry from the lavish event they had originally planned. Their marriage, however, was filled with resentment and recriminations, and it quickly deteriorated into a tense and unhappy coexistence. Clara, her artistic career a distant memory, became increasingly isolated and bitter, her dreams of grandeur shattered. Her betrayal was a heavy burden she carried alone. Laura maintained a strictly professional relationship with Marcos, mediated by their lawyers regarding the children. He had supervised visits, which he often approached with a distant, almost uncomfortable air. The children, though polite, never truly warmed to him. They saw Laura as their primary mother, their rock, the person who had always been there for them. Marcos, for all his wealth, remained a peripheral figure in their lives, a man who, by his own choices, had missed the most precious years of their childhood. The years passed. The Quadruplets, now teenagers, were flourishing. Charlotte, artistic and compassionate, showed an interest in design, often sketching ideas for La Cuchara Dorada's new product lines. Isabella, sharp and analytical, showed a knack for finance, sometimes surprising Laura with her insightful questions about market trends. Genevieve, the most adventurous, dreamed of traveling the world and exploring different cultures. Theodore, the quiet leader, was an avid reader and a budding writer, often crafting intricate stories in his spare time. Laura looked at these four remarkable individuals and knew that her greatest triumph was not just her business success, but the beautiful, loving family she had built from the ashes of betrayal. One late autumn evening, as Laura sat on the terrace of her estate, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, she received an unexpected email. It was from Marcos. It wasn't a legal document or a visitation demand. It was a simple short message, devoid of his usual arrogance. "Laura," it said, "I saw Theodore's essay in the school newsletter. It was truly brilliant. I am so sorry. I hope you and the children are well." Laura read the email, a faint, almost imperceptible pang of something she couldn't name. It wasn't pity, it wasn't forgiveness, but a distant echo of a long-gone past. She didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Her life was full, vibrant, and rich in ways Marcos could never comprehend. His regret, she knew, was not for her, but for what he had lost. A genuine connection with his children, a life with true purpose beyond the pursuit of wealth. Laura closed her laptop, a peaceful smile on her lips. She had not only survived, she had thrived. She had not only rebuilt her life, she had redefined it on her own terms, with strength, grace, and an unwavering commitment to the love that truly mattered. The golden cage was a distant memory, replaced by a boundless sky. And the years turned into decades. The Quadruplets graduated from prestigious universities, each embarking on their own successful paths. Charlotte, with a degree in design and business, joined La Cuchara Dorada, bringing a fresh, innovative vision to the brand. Isabella, armed with an MBA, became a formidable force in the financial world, eventually managing her mother's extensive portfolio and expanding it exponentially. Genevieve, after years of travel and humanitarian work, established her own nonprofit organization dedicated to sustainable development in underprivileged communities, often collaborating with La Cuchara Dorada on charitable initiatives. Theodore, true to his early passion, became a celebrated author, his novels exploring themes of resilience, family, and the complexities of human relationships, often subtly drawing inspiration from his unique upbringing. Laura, now a revered figure in both the business and philanthropic worlds, remained the matriarch, her wisdom and grace guiding her expanding empire and her beloved family. She stepped back from the daily operations of La Cuchara Dorada, entrusting much of it to Charlotte and a new generation of talented leaders. She devoted more of her time to her foundation, mentoring young female entrepreneurs and advocating for social causes. Her Marbella estate, still her home, became a vibrant hub of family gatherings, filled with the laughter of her grandchildren, a testament to the enduring love she had cultivated. Marcos Torres, a shadow of his former self, eventually retired from Torres Industries, his legacy forever tainted by the scandal. His marriage to Clara eventually ended in a quiet, undignified divorce. Clara, forgotten by the society she had once longed to conquer, lived a solitary life. Her artistic dreams were unfulfilled. Her betrayal was a heavy burden she carried alone. Marcos, increasingly isolated, occasionally tried to connect with his grown children. But the years of absence had created an unbridgeable chasm. He watched their successes from afar, a poignant reminder of the vibrant family he had so carelessly discarded. A particularly poignant moment occurred at a prestigious awards ceremony, where Laura was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award for her business success and philanthropic contributions. Her quadruplets, now distinguished adults, stood proudly by her side. As Laura, elegant and radiant, accepted the award, she looked out at the audience. Her gaze passed over countless familiar faces. And then she saw him, Marcos Torres, sitting discreetly in the back, a solitary figure, his once bright eyes now shadowed by regret, and perhaps a flicker of admiration. Laura, in her acceptance speech, did not dwell on past hurts or betrayals. Instead, she spoke of the transformative power of resilience, the strength found in unexpected beginnings, and the profound joy of building a life rooted in love and purpose. She spoke of her children, her voice filled with unmistakable maternal pride. They, she concluded, her voice clear and strong, are my greatest accomplishment, my enduring legacy. They taught me that true wealth is not measured in material possessions, but in the richness of the human spirit, in the bonds of family, and in the courage to create your own destiny. As the audience erupted in a standing ovation, Laura's eyes briefly met Marcos's again. This time, there was no anger or pain, just a quiet acknowledgement of their shared history and the undeniable truth that their paths had completely diverged, one leading to a life of fulfillment and profound happiness, the other to a quiet, solitary regret. Laura Rios had truly come full circle. She was a woman who had faced unimaginable betrayal and had emerged not just intact, but triumphant. She had transformed heartbreak into purpose, humiliation into inspiration. Her story, once a hushed scandal, had become an anthem of resilience, a powerful testament to the fact that even from the deepest valleys of despair, one can rise, rebuild, and redefine one's entire world. Her legacy was not just her successful empire, but the 4 extraordinary lives she had nurtured, the countless women she had inspired, and the enduring power of a mother's unbreakable love. And so, we close the book on Laura Rios's incredible journey. From the golden cage of betrayal to the boundless freedom of self-made success and unwavering motherhood, her story is more than a drama. It's a blueprint for resilience. Laura not only survived, but thrived, turning the ultimate betrayal into her ultimate triumph. Her refusal to be a victim, her quiet strength in building an empire and raising 4 incredible children, serves as a powerful reminder to all of us. If Laura could turn heartbreak into a legacy, imagine what you can accomplish. If this story has resonated with you, if it has ignited a spark of inspiration, then please, like this video, share this incredible tale with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to our channel for more stories of extraordinary resilience and unexpected comebacks. Don't miss our next deep dive into the lives that shape our world. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and never underestimate the power of your own comeback.
The night still smelled of champagne and cheap perfume when Ambrose Blackwell slipped through the door of his penthouse apartment. He thought the city was still asleep, but he didn't realize the storm waiting inside. His tie was undone, his hair tousled, his lips still wet from the kisses of another woman. He had spent the entire night flaunting his mistress in public, believing his pregnant wife, Jacqueline, was too weak, too naive, too fragile to ever challenge him. He thought she would cry in silence, swallow her humiliation, and keep carrying his child without complaint. But Ambrose was wrong. Because while he was sipping expensive wine in dim hotel rooms, Jacqueline had been awake, holding her belly with one hand and a stack of legal documents with the other. She was tired of being the quiet, obedient wife. She was tired of pretending everything was fine while her husband paraded another woman through Manhattan's nightclubs. Her heart had broken too many times, but this time, it was different. This time, she wasn't alone. When the clock struck 10 that morning, Ambrose walked into what he thought was a family breakfast. The Blackwell family often gathered on Sundays in the grand lounge of the penthouse. The place gleamed with Italian marble floors, golden chandeliers, and the cold smell of money. Ambrose expected the usual routine. His wife sitting silently, his mother gossiping, his father boasting about business deals. But today, Jacqueline was not in her usual pale dress, nor was she trembling in the corner like a shadow. She was sitting tall, her 6-month pregnant belly visible beneath a tailored navy dress. And beside her, with an open briefcase and a pair of sharp glasses glinting under the morning light, sat Evelyn Carter, one of the city's most ruthless divorce lawyers. Ambrose froze, his smirk faltered, his skin drained of color. Because in that single moment, Ambrose knew. The game he thought he controlled was about to collapse. The tension in the room was suffocating. His parents shifted uneasily, sensing something unusual. His mistress, who had followed him into the gathering with shameless confidence, twirled her hair and smiled as if she were the new queen of the Blackwell empire. But when Evelyn Carter lifted her chin and spread a thick file of photographs across the mahogany table, silence swallowed the air. Hotel receipts, pictures, text messages. Every lie Ambrose had told, every secret meeting, every betrayal, all laid bare in ink and paper. Ambrose's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He reached for his glass of water, but his hand trembled. His father's eyes narrowed, his mother gasped, and Jacqueline finally spoke, her voice low but steady. "After last night, Ambrose, you left me no choice. You thought I would break, but today I brought the law with me." Ambrose's mistress let out a nervous laugh, but no one joined her. The weight of Jacqueline's words pressed on every corner of the room. The husband who once strutted through gala halls, showered with applause, now sat pale and shrinking in his own living room. And this was just the beginning. Because Jacqueline wasn't here to beg. She wasn't here to cry. She wasn't even here to fight for his love anymore. She was here to end it. To end the charade, the betrayal, and the humiliation. And to reclaim the power he had stolen from her. The air thickened. The silence grew sharper. All eyes turned to Ambrose, waiting for his response. But Ambrose, the man who had once commanded boardrooms and silenced rivals with a single glare, could not even find his words. His lips parted, but the only thing he managed was a hoarse whisper. "Jacqueline, what are you doing?" Her answer cut like a blade. "Taking back my dignity." The room shook as Evelyn Carter slid the divorce papers across the table. And Ambrose realized, for the first time in his life, he was about to lose everything. Jacqueline Mitchell Blackwell never thought her life would turn into a cautionary tale whispered over coffee tables. At 29, she should have been glowing with joy, preparing for the arrival of her first child, and savoring the security of a marriage built on love. But instead, she was carrying the weight of betrayal while carrying the life of her unborn son. Her story had always looked like a fairy tale from the outside. A small-town girl who had grown up in upstate New York, she was raised in a modest home with parents who believed in hard work and dignity above all else. Her mother was a schoolteacher, her father a mechanic. They didn't have wealth, but they had values: honesty, perseverance, loyalty. Jacqueline grew up believing in those virtues, believing that love meant forever, that promises meant something. That belief was what made her fall for Ambrose Blackwell in the first place. Ambrose wasn't just any man. He was the son of one of Manhattan's most powerful real estate families. He was magnetic, ambitious, a man who seemed to know how to bend the world to his will. When Jacqueline met him at a charity fundraiser during her university years, she was struck by his confidence. He had a way of making the entire room turn toward him, as if he carried his own gravity. To Jacqueline, he seemed larger than life. But he also looked at her differently than anyone else ever had. At least that's what she believed then. He told her she was special, unique, unlike the superficial women he was surrounded by in his high society world. For a girl from a humble background, those words pierced straight into her heart. 6 months later, she was wearing a diamond ring. Their wedding was the kind of spectacle magazines love to feature. A luxury ceremony at the Plaza Hotel, chandeliers glittering, violins echoing, paparazzi flashing. Jacqueline, in a lace gown that seemed spun from dreams, thought she was stepping into forever. Guests whispered that she was lucky, that she had captured Manhattan's rising star. But Jacqueline thought Ambrose was the lucky one, because she was willing to give him her entire heart. She gave up more than just her heart. She gave up her dreams. Before marrying, Jacqueline had been on her way to building a career in interior design. She loved architecture, the way spaces could tell stories. She had studied tirelessly, sketched through the night, dreamed of opening her own design studio one day. But Ambrose wanted her to play a different role. The devoted wife, the quiet supporter, the woman who stayed in the background while he climbed toward power. At first, she didn't mind. She thought that's what love was, sacrifice. She thought their partnership meant his dreams were her dreams. So she left her ambitions behind, turned her focus to supporting his career, and built their life together in his shadow. But shadows are cold. Slowly, Jacqueline began to realize she was fading. Her days were filled with silence in the penthouse while Ambrose worked late nights, his phone buzzing with messages he didn't want her to see. He became more distant, more impatient. When she finally got pregnant, she thought it would change things. She thought fatherhood would soften him, bring him closer. For a brief moment, she even believed it had. He kissed her belly, whispered promises, and told her she was the love of his life. But that illusion shattered the night she caught the faint trace of another woman's perfume on his suit. It wasn't just once. It became a pattern. Rumors began to circle among Manhattan's elite, whispers of Ambrose seen at late dinners, slipping into hotels, entertaining women at galas while Jacqueline stayed home. She asked him about it, but his answers were sharp, dismissive. "Don't be paranoid," he snapped. "You should focus on the baby, not gossip." Her heart broke, but she stayed. She stayed because she thought love could be salvaged, because she thought their child deserved a whole family. But when Ambrose stopped coming home at night, when she found lipstick smudges on his collar, when he didn't even bother to hide anymore, she knew the truth. She wasn't a wife to him anymore. She was an obstacle. And yet, Jacqueline was not as weak as Ambrose thought. Her quietness was not surrender. Her tears were not the end. Somewhere deep inside her, the values her parents raised her with, dignity, perseverance, courage, began to resurface. She realized that staying silent was no longer an option. Her baby deserved a mother who stood tall, not one who bowed to humiliation. So she began to prepare. While Ambrose thought she was too broken to resist, Jacqueline was meeting with lawyers. She found Evelyn Carter, a woman known for her iron will and unshakable presence in court. Evelyn didn't just see a heartbroken wife. She saw a fighter. Together, they built a plan. A plan not just to leave Ambrose, but to confront him in the one way he never expected. Publicly, in front of the very people he valued more than his own wife. Jacqueline spent sleepless nights collecting evidence, documenting every betrayal, every lie. She carried her baby with one hand and her dignity with the other, waiting for the moment when she would finally stand face to face with Ambrose, no longer as the obedient wife, but as the woman ready to end the charade. And that moment had come. Because when Ambrose walked into the family gathering after a night with his mistress, he thought he was still untouchable. But Jacqueline was no longer the woman he remembered. She was stronger, sharper, and no longer afraid. And when her eyes locked with his across the room, Ambrose knew this was not the same Jacqueline he had married. This was the Jacqueline who had come to destroy his lies. The Blackwell penthouse was not a home. It was a fortress of wealth, a monument to power, and a stage built for appearances. Perched high above Manhattan, the glass walls offered sweeping views of the city. Glittering lights, endless avenues, the Hudson flowing like liquid silver beneath the skyline. But inside, the air was colder than the steel beams that held the building together. This was where Ambrose Blackwell lived, worked, and played. To him, the penthouse was proof that he had won the game of life. Every marble tile, every golden chandelier, every leather armchair imported from Italy whispered of victory. He loved hosting guests here. Investors, politicians, celebrities. It was a place where he could show off his influence, where laughter clinked with champagne flutes and deals were signed with the stroke of a pen. But to Jacqueline, the penthouse had always felt like a cage. When she first moved in after their wedding, she tried to convince herself it was magical. She marveled at the spiral staircase, the crystal chandeliers, the private terrace with a view of Central Park. Friends from her small hometown gasped when she sent them photos. They told her she was lucky. But the longer she lived there, the more she realized the truth. The walls were too high, the rooms too wide, the silence too heavy. Ambrose filled the penthouse with everything money could buy, but he left no space for warmth. The air always smelled faintly of cologne and ink, never of home-cooked meals or fresh flowers. Even when Jacqueline decorated with her own touch, soft curtains, framed photos, a vase of daisies, Ambrose brushed it aside, saying it made the place look cheap. The penthouse became a reflection of him, grand, cold, and lonely. It was also the backdrop of her worst humiliations. She remembered the nights she waited by the window, watching headlights approach, hoping it was Ambrose finally coming home. Instead, hours passed, and when he did arrive, he reeked of liquor and perfume. She remembered the dinner parties where she sat at the far end of the table, her smile forced, while Ambrose charmed their guests and ignored her. The penthouse was filled with laughter, but none of it was hers. Now, that same penthouse was about to become something else entirely, a courtroom. When Jacqueline told Evelyn Carter her plan, the lawyer nodded sharply. Make him face it here in his sanctuary. That's where the fall will sting the most. So it was decided. The family meeting would take place in the lounge of the Blackwell penthouse. The room was the heart of the empire, a space lined with dark oak shelves filled with rare books no one read, a massive fireplace carved from Italian marble, and an oval dining table polished so bright it reflected faces like a mirror. At the center of the table usually sat Ambrose, with Jacqueline quietly at his side. But this morning, the arrangement was different. Jacqueline sat at the head of the table. Evelyn Carter sat beside her, papers neatly stacked, pen in hand, expression sharp as a blade. Across from them, Ambrose's parents shifted uneasily in their seats. Harold Blackwell, Ambrose's father, was a man of iron hair and iron temper. He had built the family fortune through ruthless real estate acquisitions, and he despised weakness in any form. Next to him sat Margaret Blackwell, a woman draped in pearls and silence, her gaze darting nervously as though scanning for a safe escape. And then there was Cassandra. Ambrose had been reckless enough to bring his mistress into the lion's den. Cassandra Monroe, barely 25, with red lipstick smeared like a flag of victory, sat smugly at Ambrose's side. She wore a designer dress that clung to her every curve, a deliberate contrast to Jacqueline's modest elegance. Her eyes flickered with triumph, as if she believed she had already won. The atmosphere in the lounge was suffocating. The clinking of a spoon against a teacup echoed too loudly. The ticking of the grandfather clock scraped against every nerve. Even the city outside, usually roaring with car horns and sirens, seemed to hush in anticipation. Jacqueline sat still, but her heart was pounding. She rested her hand on her belly, steadying herself with the quiet rhythm of the life inside her. She wasn't just fighting for herself today, she was fighting for her child. When Ambrose finally strolled in, late as always, his swagger filled the room. His tuxedo jacket was slightly wrinkled, his hair disheveled from the night before. He looked like a man who had been celebrating instead of sleeping. His smirk widened when he saw Cassandra already seated. He kissed her hand boldly, as if daring Jacqueline to react. But then his eyes met Jacqueline's. Something shifted. She was no longer the fragile woman he had grown used to ignoring. Her back was straight, her eyes clear, her presence commanding. And the woman seated beside her, Evelyn Carter, with her cold stare and thick file, sent a chill down his spine. Ambrose faltered, just slightly, but it was enough. "Jacqueline," he said smoothly, trying to recover. "You look different today." "I am different," she replied, her voice steady, cutting through the silence like glass. Every pair of eyes in the room turned toward her. The weight of history, betrayal, and power pressed into the space between them. This was the house Ambrose had built, the empire he believed was unshakable. But Jacqueline had transformed it into the stage of his downfall. The city lights glimmered outside like 1,000 watchful eyes, as if New York itself was waiting to see what would unfold. The chandeliers glittered above, the marble floor gleamed below, and in that vast room of wealth and silence, the air crackled with tension. For years, Jacqueline had been a ghost in this penthouse. But today, she was the fire. And when Evelyn Carter slowly opened her briefcase, the first document sliding across the table, everyone in that cold, glittering room realized the battle for the Blackwell Empire had just begun. Ambrose Blackwell was the kind of man people either envied or feared. In Manhattan's elite circles, his name carried weight. He was ruthless in business, charming at parties, and arrogant in every way that power allows. People said he could talk an investor into signing away millions with just a smile. Others said he could destroy a rival with a single phone call. For years, Jacqueline had believed his charisma was magnetic, but she now saw what lay beneath: greed, vanity, and a hunger that could never be satisfied. Ambrose thrived on appearances. He drove the rarest cars, wore custom Italian suits, and dined in restaurants where the bill for two could buy a family a month's rent. To him, life was a performance, and he always played the lead role. He believed he was untouchable, that no one could ever expose his weaknesses, especially not Jacqueline, the quiet wife he had pushed into the background. But the truth was simple. Behind the sharp tuxedos and polished shoes, Ambrose was a coward. When confronted, he laughed it off. When caught, he lied. And when cornered, he attacked. For him, power wasn't just about business. It was about control. Control over investors, control over his employees, and worst of all, control over his wife. He believed Jacqueline would never leave. She was pregnant, financially tied to him, socially dependent on his name. In his mind, she had no escape. And then there was Cassandra. Cassandra Monroe was everything Ambrose thought he wanted. 25, beautiful, bold, and shameless. She had been a junior marketing associate at one of his subsidiary companies. Ambrose noticed her at a corporate gala, where she wore a scarlet gown and laughed just a little too loudly at his jokes. She knew exactly how to play the part. The wide eyes, the flattering words, the way her hand lingered on his arm. Ambrose, already bored of Jacqueline's quiet grace, was captivated by Cassandra's fire. At first, she was discreet. A late-night dinner, a weekend business trip, a hotel suite booked under another name. But soon, discretion became arrogance. Cassandra wasn't satisfied with being a secret. She wanted recognition, jewels, the spotlight. She wanted to be photographed on Ambrose's arm, wanted the world to whisper her name. And Ambrose, intoxicated by her youth and flattery, gave in. He flaunted her at exclusive clubs. He brought her to art auctions. He even dared to take her to the Metropolitan Opera, where half the city's elite whispered behind their programs while Jacqueline stayed home. Each time, he convinced himself he was untouchable. He thought Jacqueline would endure it, because she had no other choice. Cassandra, on the other hand, thrived on Jacqueline's silence. To her, every tear Jacqueline shed was proof of her own victory. Every time Ambrose ignored his wife for her, Cassandra felt like she had won. She strutted into the penthouse with her lipstick-stained smile, pretending she was already the new Mrs. Blackwell. But beneath Cassandra's confidence was something more dangerous: ambition. She wasn't just after Ambrose's affection, she was after his empire. She whispered into his ear about expanding his business, advised him to cut off old partners, and encouraged him to take bigger risks. To Ambrose, she seemed like a partner who believed in his vision. In truth, Cassandra believed only in herself. She knew that if Jacqueline were pushed aside, she would gain not just Ambrose's name, but also his wealth and influence. That was why, on the morning of the family meeting, Cassandra walked into the penthouse lounge with her head high. She thought this was the moment she would be legitimized. She thought Ambrose would finally make it clear to everyone. Jacqueline was finished, and Cassandra was the future. But Cassandra underestimated one thing. She underestimated Jacqueline. As Evelyn Carter spread the evidence across the table, Cassandra's smile flickered. The photos of hotel receipts, the texts Ambrose had sent in the middle of the night, the credit card bills, they weren't just embarrassing. They were damning. Cassandra leaned closer to Ambrose, her hand tightening on his arm, her red nails digging into his skin. "Do something," she hissed under her breath. But Ambrose could feel the heat of every eye in the room. His father's glare burned with disappointment. His mother's eyes brimmed with shame. Evelyn's sharp gaze pinned him like a predator. And Jacqueline wasn't trembling or begging. She was calm, strong. For the first time in his life, Ambrose felt cornered. He tried to laugh it off. "Really, Jacqueline? Is this what it's come to? Dragging a lawyer into our family breakfast? Do you want to humiliate me?" Her reply was simple. "No, Ambrose, you humiliated yourself." Cassandra's smugness faltered. She had expected Jacqueline to crumble, but instead she was rising. The room's energy was shifting. For the first time, Cassandra realized that being Ambrose's mistress might not secure her future. It might destroy her with him. Ambrose, however, couldn't see it yet. He was too blinded by pride. He slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the lounge. "I built this empire. Everything you have is because of me. Do you really think you can take me down with a few pieces of paper?" Evelyn Carter leaned forward, her voice sharp and deliberate. "These aren't just pieces of paper, Mr. Blackwell. They are evidence. Evidence that will not only secure Jacqueline's freedom, but also expose your misconduct to the public. Judges love cases like this, especially when they involve a man flaunting his mistress while his pregnant wife sits at home." The silence after her words was deafening. Even Cassandra shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Ambrose's smirk finally broke. His confidence slipped like a mask torn away. For the first time, the great Ambrose Blackwell looked small. But Jacqueline wasn't finished. She placed her hand over her belly, her gaze steady. "You thought I was weak. You thought I would stay silent. But today, Ambrose, the world will see the truth." And in that instant, Ambrose realized he was no longer the predator. He was the prey. The silence in the Blackwell penthouse was suffocating. Every person in the room could feel it pressing against their skin, crawling into their lungs. Ambrose sat at the long oak table, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between the damning photographs and the lawyer's cold stare. Cassandra clung to his arm, whispering under her breath, but even she couldn't hide the flicker of panic in her eyes. For years, Ambrose had played his role perfectly. The devoted son, the brilliant businessman, the dazzling host of Manhattan's most glittering parties. He had built his image like a skyscraper, floor by floor, until the city believed in his invincibility. But now, in his own penthouse, the foundation was cracking, and the people who mattered most were watching. Harold Blackwell's face was stone. His voice, when it came, was sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Is this true, Ambrose?" Ambrose swallowed hard. "Father, it's not what it looks like." Margaret Blackwell let out a trembling gasp. "My God, Ambrose, how could you?" Ambrose's cheeks flushed with rage. He hated weakness, and right now he looked weak. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "This is absurd. She's exaggerating. She's using her pregnancy as a shield. Jacqueline, stop this nonsense before you embarrass yourself further." But Evelyn Carter was already opening another file. She slid a stack of papers across the polished wood. "Hotel records, charges made with your corporate credit card, surveillance footage from the Waldorf, signed receipts with your handwriting. Do you still want to call this nonsense, Mr. Blackwell?" Ambrose's mouth snapped shut. His eyes darted to the documents, recognizing his own signature, his own mistakes. Cassandra stiffened beside him, realizing that the glamorous ride she had hitched herself to was heading straight into a storm. And then came the dagger. Jacqueline reached into her purse and pulled out a slim black phone. Her fingers moved with steady precision as she unlocked the screen and pressed play. The video projected onto the television across the lounge. The room gasped. There was Ambrose, caught in high-definition clarity, laughing with Cassandra at a rooftop bar. his hand on her thigh, his lips against her neck, his voice bragging to a colleague. Jacqueline? She's boring. She's just the mother of my child. Cassandra is the one who excites me. She's the real future. The words echoed through the room like a gunshot. Margaret covered her mouth with shaking hands, Harold's fists clenched against the table. Evelyn watched coolly, her expression unreadable. And Cassandra, caught on camera, stared at the floor, her lipstick smile fading into ashes. Ambrose lunged forward, fumbling for the remote. "Turn that off! That video is private. It's—" Jacqueline's voice sliced through his desperation. "Private? No, Ambrose. When you humiliate your wife in public, when you bring your mistress into our home, nothing is private anymore." Her words landed like a thunderclap. Ambrose froze, his eyes wide, his mask of arrogance finally slipping. The betrayal wasn't just whispered behind closed doors anymore. It was out in the open, undeniable, humiliating. The man who had strutted through the city believing himself untouchable was being stripped bare in front of his parents, his mistress, and the woman he had underestimated. For Jacqueline, it was both agony and liberation. Watching the video, hearing her husband dismiss her as if she were nothing, still burned. But showing it here, forcing him to face the truth in front of witnesses, gave her strength. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one being silenced. She was the one holding the weapon. Cassandra shifted nervously, her hand slipping from Ambrose's arm. She could feel the room turning against him, and by extension, against her. Her plan to bask in the glow of his power was disintegrating by the second. She glanced at Harold, who was glaring at her as though she were a stain on the Blackwell name. For the first time, Cassandra wondered if she should have stayed in her place. Ambrose tried to regain control, but his words stumbled. This is all twisted. Jacqueline, you've manipulated this. You're trying to ruin me." "No," she said firmly. "You ruined yourself." The weight of her words silenced the room again. Jacqueline's hand rested protectively on her belly, her back straight, her eyes unwavering. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was the one leading the charge. Harold finally spoke, his voice low but deadly. "Ambrose, do you realize what you've done? This isn't just about your marriage. This is about the Blackwell name, our business, our reputation, and you've dragged it through the mud." Ambrose's face crumpled. He had spent his entire life chasing his father's approval, desperate to be seen as his equal. Now, in one morning, he had destroyed it. Margaret's voice broke. "Jacqueline, darling, I had no idea." Jacqueline's eyes softened briefly. She wasn't here to punish Margaret. She wasn't even here to seek Harold's validation. She was here to reclaim her dignity. Ambrose's hand slammed against the table again, his desperation spilling out. "You can't do this to me, Jacqueline. Think of the baby. Think of everything I've given you." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury. "You gave me betrayal. You gave me humiliation. But you never gave me respect. And I won't let my child grow up in a house built on lies." The words hung heavy in the air. Ambrose staggered back as if struck. For once, he couldn't find an argument, couldn't summon his charm. The truth had cornered him, and there was no escape. Cassandra leaned back in her chair, her silence louder than any defense. Even she couldn't save him now. Jacqueline looked around the room, her gaze steady, her presence unshakable. "You wanted to make a spectacle of me, Ambrose. You wanted to parade your mistress in front of everyone. But today, the spectacle is yours." And as Evelyn Carter lifted the divorce papers and placed them directly in front of Ambrose, the world he had built on arrogance and deceit began to collapse in front of everyone's eyes. The documents lay on the table like a death sentence. The silence that followed was unbearable, heavy with the weight of every secret that had just been exposed. Ambrose stared at the divorce papers as though they were written in a language he couldn't comprehend. Cassandra had shrunk into her chair, her once bright confidence evaporating. Harold's face was dark with disappointment, Margaret's with quiet shame. But Jacqueline was trembling, not outwardly, not in the way that would give Ambrose satisfaction, but deep inside. Her body quaked under the pressure. She held her chin high, her eyes clear, but her heart was pounding so fiercely she feared the child inside her could feel it. For months, she had gathered courage. For weeks, she had plotted, and for days, she had prayed for the strength to see this through. Now that the moment was here, reality hit with brutal force. Her husband had betrayed her. publicly, shamelessly. And now, even as she claimed her dignity back, she realized the enormity of what she was doing. She wasn't just ending a marriage, she was ending the life she thought she had built. Her breath came shallow, her hand instinctively clutching her stomach. Evelyn leaned close and whispered, "You're doing fine. Don't let him see your fear." But Ambrose saw something. He smirked faintly, sensing weakness like a predator smelling blood. "You think you're strong, Jacqueline? Look at you, shaking. Do you really think you can survive without me? You're carrying my child, living in my home, spending my money. Without me, you're nothing." The words hit like a whip. For a second, her vision blurred. She wanted to scream, to throw the papers across the room, to collapse under the crushing humiliation. Her body, heavy with pregnancy, felt like a burden. The years of sacrifice, the nights she spent waiting alone, the love she had poured into this marriage, it all came crashing back. Margaret reached toward her, but Jacqueline pulled away. She didn't want pity. She wanted strength. Yet in that moment, strength felt like an illusion. Her mind drifted to her parents, to the small home she grew up in, to the nights when her father fixed cars late into the evening, while her mother marked papers by the kitchen lamp. They had dreamed bigger dreams for her. They had raised her to believe in love, in loyalty. What would they say now, seeing her sitting in this cold palace, betrayed by the man she once trusted most? The tears she had held back threatened to spill. Evelyn touched her arm gently, a reminder to breathe. Jacqueline closed her eyes for a moment, steadying herself. But Ambrose saw the flicker of pain and pressed harder. "Sign the papers if you want," he sneered. "But you'll come crawling back. You won't last a month without me. Women like you never do." Cassandra stirred beside him, eager to regain her place. "He's right, Jacqueline," she said, her voice sweet but sharp. "You're just a tired little wife. You don't belong in his world anymore. Look at you, swollen, miserable. I'm what he needs. I'm the future." The cruelty sliced through Jacqueline's defenses. Her hand shook visibly now, and she lowered her gaze to the table. For the first time that morning, she felt cornered, defeated. Her heart squeezed painfully as if all her resolve had been for nothing. Evelyn leaned closer again. "Don't let them win. Not like this." But the voices in Jacqueline's mind were louder than Evelyn's encouragement. What if they were right? What if she couldn't survive? She had no career anymore, no income of her own. Ambrose controlled the accounts, the properties, everything. She had sacrificed too much for him, and now she was left with almost nothing. How would she raise a child alone in a city like this? Her hands trembled harder. The room blurred with tears. For one terrifying second, she wanted to give in, to let Ambrose win, to let Cassandra laugh, to crumble into the quiet, obedient woman they thought she was. And Ambrose saw it. His smirk returned, crueler than ever. He leaned back in his chair, his confidence swelling again. "See? She can't do it. She doesn't have the strength." Jacqueline's chest tightened. Her breathing turned shallow. She excused herself, rising unsteadily from her chair. I need air," she murmured, her voice breaking. Evelyn moved to follow, but Jacqueline shook her head. She didn't want witnesses to her collapse. She staggered out of the lounge and into the wide hallway of the penthouse. The marble floor blurred beneath her, her reflection in the glossy walls looking like a stranger. She stumbled into the nursery. The room she had lovingly prepared, painted in soft creams and blues, filled with tiny clothes and stuffed animals. She gripped the edge of the crib, her tears finally spilling. The pain racked her chest, her sobs breaking the silence. For the first time since this began, Jacqueline allowed herself to fall apart. She pressed her forehead to the crib's wooden rail and wept. "Why? Why did you do this to me, Ambrose? Why wasn't I enough?" Her hand moved to her belly, trembling. "How do I raise this child alone? How do I protect him when I feel so broken?" Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, clutching her stomach as though it were her only anchor. The weight of betrayal crushed her, the enormity of the future suffocating her. In the lounge, Ambrose smirked at Evelyn. "She's gone to cry like she always does. This is who she is. Weak." But Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She had seen women like Jacqueline before. Women who broke, only to rebuild stronger than anyone expected. She knew the breakdown was not the end. It was the spark. Back in the nursery, Jacqueline wiped her tears, staring at the crib. The tiny clothes, the folded blankets, the stuffed bear with a ribbon around its neck. She whispered to the child inside her, "I don't know how yet, but I will protect you. I will not let him win." She stood slowly, her tears drying on her cheeks, her reflection in the window clearer now. She was still trembling, still raw, still hurt. But in her eyes, beneath the pain, something new flickered. It wasn't surrender, it was survival. And as she straightened her back, the sound of the lounge doors creaking open told her someone was coming. Someone who might change everything. The nursery door creaked open, and Jacqueline instinctively wiped her cheeks. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, broken, sitting on the floor with swollen eyes. But the figure that entered wasn't Ambrose or Cassandra. It was Evelyn Carter, the lawyer, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood. "Jacqueline," Evelyn said gently, crouching down so she was eye level. "You did well in there. Don't think your tears mean you failed. They mean you're human." Jacqueline shook her head, her voice breaking. "He's right, Evelyn. What if I can't survive without him? He controls everything. The accounts, the house, even the nursery furniture. What do I have?" Evelyn's expression shifted, sharp and knowing. "You have more than you realize. Ambrose made one critical mistake, one he doesn't know you've already discovered." Jacqueline blinked, her tears pausing. "What mistake?" Evelyn opened her briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope. She handed it to Jacqueline, her eyes glittering with quiet triumph. "This." With trembling hands, Jacqueline tore it open. Inside was a set of documents, bank statements, ownership certificates, legal transfers. Her eyes scanned the pages, disbelief flooding her face. "These are," she gasped, "these are in my name." Evelyn nodded. "Correct. Months ago, Ambrose tried to hide assets in an offshore account. He thought he was clever, transferring properties into a dummy corporation. But his arrogance betrayed him. He used your maiden name as a cover, assuming no one would look twice. That oversight means legally you are the listed owner of those assets, and it's worth millions." Jacqueline's breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. For months she had felt powerless, convinced Ambrose held all the cards. But here, in her hands, was proof that the empire he had tried to hide was already under her control. "But why didn't he know?" she whispered. "Because men like Ambrose don't bother checking the details," Evelyn said coldly. "They assume their wives are too blind to ever look. He still thinks those accounts are invisible. He doesn't know that with one signature, you can freeze his funds, transfer ownership, and leave him with nothing." Jacqueline's tears dried instantly. Her body still shook, but this time with something new: power. For the first time since her nightmare began, she wasn't trapped. She wasn't the weak, trembling wife he thought she was. She was holding the key to his downfall. The baby kicked inside her belly as if sensing the change. She placed a hand on her stomach, whispering, "We're going to be okay." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Better than okay. You're about to show Ambrose that the woman he thought was powerless is the one who will end him." Jacqueline straightened slowly, rising to her feet. The nursery around her no longer looked like a cage. It looked like a battlefield. And she was ready to fight. They returned to the lounge. Ambrose was leaning back in his chair, laughing bitterly, as if he'd already won. Cassandra sat close to him again, her confidence tentatively restored by Jacqueline's brief retreat. "There she is," Ambrose sneered. Back from her little cry, ready to sign and get this over with, Jacqueline walked to her seat calmly, the envelope still in her hand. She sat, folded her hands neatly on the tables and looked Ambrose dead in the eye. "No, Ambrose, I'm ready to end this, on my terms." Evelyn slid the documents onto the table. Ambrose frowned, curiosity flickering into unease. "What's this?" "Your biggest mistake," Jacqueline said. Evelyn's voice carried the final blow. "Mr. Blackwell, as of this morning, Jacqueline is the legal owner of 3 properties in the Hamptons, 2 high-rise buildings downtown, and an account containing $36 million. All registered under her name, thanks to your sloppy attempts to hide your assets." The blood drained from Ambrose's face. "That's impossible." "Check for yourself," Evelyn said, tapping the papers. Ambrose snatched the documents, his hands trembling as he scanned the pages. Each line confirmed what Evelyn had said. His arrogance had betrayed him. The assets he thought untouchable had already slipped through his fingers and into Jacqueline's hands. Cassandra leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Ambrose, is this true?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. His silence was louder than any admission. Jacqueline's voice was steady, her calm terrifying. You see, Ambrose, while you were busy parading your mistress, I was protecting myself. You thought I was weak, but I was preparing. Every lie you told, every dollar you tried to hide, I collected. And now, the empire you built is mine. Ambrose slammed the papers onto the table. You can't do this. I already have, Jacqueline said. The room erupted. Margaret gasped. Harold leaned forward with a rare glimmer of respect in his eyes. Cassandra shifted away from Ambrose, realizing his empire was crumbling, and with it, her own future. Ambrose stood, his chair toppling backward, his face twisted with rage. You think you've won? You think you can humiliate me like this? Jacqueline rose too, her belly prominent, her eyes unshakable. This isn't about humiliation. This is about truth. You destroyed our marriage, Ambrose. You disrespected me, our child, and everything I sacrificed. And now you will face the consequences. The words echoed through the lounge, louder than any outburst Ambrose had ever made. For the first time, it was Jacqueline's voice that carried power. Ambrose's fists clenched. He wanted to shout, to strike, to regain control. But the documents on the table mocked him. His father's glare burned through him. His mother's tears shamed him. His mistress's silence betrayed him. And his wife, no, not his wife anymore, but his judge had stripped him bare. Cassandra shifted her seat further away, her hand slipping from his arm. She could see where this was heading. Ambrose was sinking, and she had no intention of sinking with him. Ambrose's chest heaved, his voice breaking into a roar. You'll regret this, Jacqueline. You'll regret crossing me. But Jacqueline didn't flinch. She placed her hand on her belly, her voice calm and resolute. No, Ambrose, the only regret here is yours. And as the weight of her words settled, Ambrose realized the empire he thought was unshakable was already collapsing. And it was his pregnant wife who had dealt the final blow. The day after the confrontation in the penthouse, Manhattan felt like a different city to Jacqueline. The skyscrapers still pierced the sky, the traffic still roared, and the sidewalks still pulsed with life. But for the first time in years, she wasn't walking through it as Ambrose Blackwell's wife. She was walking as Jacqueline Mitchell, her own woman, her own name, her own power. The papers Evelyn Carter handed her had changed everything. For months, Jacqueline had lived in fear, convinced she was trapped in Ambrose's shadow. But now, the shadow was gone. The empire Ambrose had tried to hide was legally hers, and the public exposure of his betrayal had shattered the illusion of his invincibility. Still, victory came with scars. That night, after everyone left, Jacqueline sat alone in the nursery, staring at the tiny crib. The adrenaline from the confrontation had faded and exhaustion weighed on her body. She touched her belly, whispering to the child within, "We made it through." But this is just the beginning. She realized she couldn't just win a battle. She had to rebuild her entire life. The next morning, Evelyn arrived at her apartment with a cup of coffee and a sharp look in her eyes. "You did it," she said, "but now you need to show the world who you are. You can't just survive Ambrose, Jacqueline. You have to surpass him." Jacqueline frowned. "How? I've been out of the world for so long. I gave up my career. I don't even recognize the woman in the mirror anymore." Evelyn smiled knowingly. "Then it's time you meet her again." And so began Jacqueline's transformation. The first step was practical, reclaiming her independence. Evelyn introduced her to a financial advisor, a woman named Claire, who spoke with calm authority. Together they went through the accounts, the properties, the hidden assets Ambrose had tried to bury. Claire explained each step, guiding Jacqueline in how to manage her newfound power. For the first time, Jacqueline saw numbers not as chains, but as keys. Every dollar Ambrose had once used to control her was now fuel for her freedom. The second step was personal. Jacqueline stood in front of her mirror one evening, staring at the woman reflected back. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes tired, her body heavy with pregnancy. But beneath that fatigue was strength. She booked a simple haircut, one that framed her face and restored her confidence. She shopped for maternity clothes that weren't just functional, but elegant. Soft silk dresses, tailored coats, shoes that gave her height without sacrificing comfort. Each piece was a declaration. She was not broken. She was reborn. When she walked through the streets of Manhattan after her makeover, heads turned. Not because she was Ambrose's wife, but because she radiated something he never gave her permission to own: authority. The third step was emotional. For weeks, she attended quiet therapy sessions where she unpacked the years of gaslighting, the nights of loneliness, the humiliation of betrayal. The therapist reminded her that strength wasn't the absence of pain, it was the choice to rise despite it. Each session was like peeling away another layer of shame, until what remained was not a victim, but a survivor. The final step was symbolic. Evelyn arranged for Jacqueline to attend the Bright Futures Gala, the very same event where Ambrose had once flaunted Cassandra as if Jacqueline didn't exist. This time, Jacqueline wouldn't be the woman hidden at home. She would walk into that ballroom as herself, radiant, pregnant, and untouchable. On the night of the gala, Jacqueline stood in her apartment, staring at her reflection. The gown Evelyn had helped her choose was deep emerald, the color of renewal and strength. It hugged her belly gracefully, transforming her pregnancy from a vulnerability into a crown. Her hair shimmered under the light, her makeup soft but commanding. "You look powerful," Evelyn said, standing behind her. Jacqueline took a deep breath. "I feel powerful." The limousine ride to the gala felt surreal. As the car glided through the streets, Jacqueline watched the city lights reflect against the windows. This was the city that had once made her feel small. Tonight, it would see her rise. When she stepped into the ballroom, silence followed her. Conversations paused, glasses froze midair. Whispers erupted across the room. "That's Jacqueline Blackwell. She looks incredible. Did you hear what happened with Ambrose? They say she owns half his empire now." The very people who once pitied her now stared in awe, some even in fear. And then across the room she saw him. Ambrose. His tuxedo was perfect, his smile carefully practiced, but his eyes betrayed him. He hadn't expected her. He hadn't expected her to shine. Cassandra clung to his arm, but even she looked rattled, her confidence no match for Jacqueline's quiet fire. For the first time in their marriage, Ambrose looked small standing in the same room as her. Jacqueline lifted her chin, letting the cameras capture her, letting the whispers grow. She didn't need to approach him. Her presence was enough. She was no longer defined by his betrayal. She was defined by her survival. As the orchestra swelled and the gala resumed, Evelyn leaned toward her. "This is just the beginning, Jacqueline. The city has seen you fall. Now it will see you rise." Jacqueline smiled faintly, her hand resting on her belly. She wasn't just rising for herself, she was rising for the life she carried, for the future she would shape without Ambrose. And as she stood under the chandeliers, glowing with strength and dignity, she knew the battle wasn't over. Because soon, she would not only rise above Ambrose, she would confront him publicly and end his reign once and for all. The chandeliers glittered above the grand ballroom of the Bright Futures Gala, scattering light across crystal glasses and gowns worth small fortunes. The city's elite had gathered, their conversations a hum of wealth and ambition. Photographers hovered near the red carpet entrance, waiting for the night's most powerful arrivals. And then, Jacqueline entered. Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras flashed, capturing her emerald gown flowing gracefully over her pregnant belly. Her shoulders squared with quiet confidence. For months, she had been a subject of whispers, the betrayed wife, the humiliated mother-to-be. But tonight, she walked as though she had been reborn. Her entrance was deliberate. Every step across the marble floor was a declaration. She was no longer hiding. Evelyn Carter walked beside her, calm and watchful, a silent guardian at her side. Together, they drew the eyes of the entire ballroom. Across the room, Ambrose froze. He had been entertaining a circle of investors, his smile wide, his hand firmly gripping Cassandra's waist. For weeks, he had tried to rebuild his image, insisting the rumors of betrayal were exaggerated, that his marriage troubles were private. But the sight of Jacqueline, radiant and unshaken, shattered his composure. "Ambrose," whispered one of the investors, "isn't that your wife?" Ambrose's jaw tightened. "Ex-wife," he muttered, though the divorce wasn't finalized. Cassandra's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes darting nervously toward Jacqueline. The mistress had expected Jacqueline to stay hidden, broken. She hadn't anticipated this. A woman transformed into a force that threatened to eclipse them both. Jacqueline moved through the crowd, heads turning as she passed. Some guests whispered in awe, others in pity, but all recognized the drama about to unfold. At the center of the ballroom, she stopped. A waiter offered her champagne, but she waved it away, resting her hand on her stomach instead. Ambrose, forced by dozens of curious eyes, crossed the room to confront her. His smile was strained, his voice low. "What do you think you're doing here?" Jacqueline lifted her chin. "Taking back my place." He glanced around at the watching faces, his mask slipping. "Don't make a scene." She gave a soft, almost amused laugh. "You made the scene, Ambrose. I'm just finishing it." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the interruption, but since so many of you are investors, business partners, and supposed friends of Mr. Blackwell, you deserve to know the truth." The crowd leaned in, their curiosity sharpening into hunger. Manhattan thrived on scandals, and tonight promised a feast. Evelyn produced a folder from her sleek clutch. "We have here evidence of Mr. Blackwell's misconduct, misappropriation of company funds, concealed assets, and, most damningly, an affair flaunted while his wife carried his child. He may claim to be a man of integrity, but the records show otherwise." Gasps erupted. Phones rose into the air, recording. Ambrose's face drained of color. "Stop this," he hissed. "Do you know what you're doing?" "Yes," Jacqueline said firmly, her voice carrying across the room. "I'm showing everyone who you really are." Cassandra tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "This is ridiculous. No one cares about personal drama." Evelyn cut her off. "This isn't just personal. Ambrose used corporate accounts to fund hotel stays, luxury gifts, even flights for his mistress. That isn't personal. That's fraud." The crowd erupted again, whispers turning into sharp murmurs. Investors exchanged glances, calculating losses. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Ambrose staggered, sweat beading on his forehead. "You won't survive this," he muttered to Jacqueline. "Do you think they'll respect you more than me?" Jacqueline's eyes blazed. "I don't need their respect. I already have my freedom, and soon my child will have a life without you poisoning it." Her words landed like a slap, the crowd gasping again. Cameras zoomed closer, capturing every flicker of Ambrose's unraveling composure. Cassandra slipped away quietly, sensing the ship sinking beneath her feet. Then Evelyn delivered the final blow. She held up a signed document, her voice ringing clear. "For those concerned about your investments, you should know. The controlling stake in 3 of Blackwell Holdings' most valuable properties now rests in Jacqueline Mitchell's name. Ambrose doesn't control them anymore. She does." The room fell into stunned silence. Then came the murmurs, the shifting alliances. Investors turned their backs on Ambrose, moving toward Jacqueline. Journalists rushed forward, snapping photos of her, as though she were the star of the evening. Ambrose's voice cracked, desperation spilling out. "You can't do this to me. You're my wife." Jacqueline stepped closer, her hand firm on her stomach, her eyes unflinching. "No, Ambrose, I was your wife, and you destroyed that. Tonight I'm something more. I'm the woman who ended your reign." The orchestra, sensing the moment, struck a dramatic note. The crowd erupted into applause. Not for Ambrose, but for Jacqueline. In that instant, she wasn't a victim. She was victorious. Ambrose stumbled back, his face pale, his empire crumbling before his eyes. The cameras caught it all. The fall of a man who thought himself untouchable, brought down not by rivals, but by the wife he underestimated. Jacqueline stood tall, radiant under the chandeliers, her presence commanding the entire room. She had endured humiliation, heartbreak, and betrayal, but now she was the one holding power. And as the applause swelled, she leaned close enough for Ambrose to hear, her words like a dagger. "This is just the beginning. Tomorrow, the world will know everything." The morning after the Bright Futures Gala, Manhattan buzzed with one headline. Every newspaper, every online magazine, every social media feed carried the same image. Jacqueline Mitchell Blackwell, radiant in emerald, standing tall while Ambrose Blackwell wilted beside her. "Queen Jacqueline claims her throne," screamed one headline. "Betrayed wife destroys tycoon," read another. And perhaps the most satisfying, "Ambrose Blackwell, the fall of a king." Jacqueline sipped her tea in the quiet of her apartment, her baby shifting gently inside her. For once, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't crying. She was free. The phone rang constantly, reporters begging for interviews, charities asking her to speak, investors offering partnerships. Evelyn screened them all, keeping the noise at bay. "You don't need to rush," she said firmly. "You've already won. Now you decide how to write the next chapter." Meanwhile, Ambrose's empire collapsed like a house of cards. Investors withdrew, board members resigned, and Cassandra vanished from the public eye. His father, Harold, issued a rare statement condemning his son's actions and praising Jacqueline's courage. Margaret sent flowers and a note that read, "You showed more dignity in one night than Ambrose has in his entire life." Ambrose himself retreated into silence. Once the golden boy of Wall Street, he was now the cautionary tale. Paparazzi caught glimpses of him leaving hotels alone, unshaven, his arrogance gone. The man who once sneered, "Without me, you're nothing," had become exactly that. Nothing. For Jacqueline, the weeks that followed were not just about revenge, but about renewal. She turned her focus inward, preparing for motherhood with strength she hadn't known she possessed. She enrolled in classes for new mothers, met with designers to finally reopen her dream of an interior design studio, and reconnected with old friends she had abandoned under Ambrose's control. One afternoon, as she painted a mural in the nursery, a sky of hot air balloons drifting over rolling hills, Evelyn walked in smiling. "The world wants to hear your voice," she said. "They've heard about your pain. Now, let them hear your power." Jacqueline hesitated. "Do you think they'll listen?" Evelyn nodded. "They already are. What you did at the gala wasn't just about Ambrose. It was about every woman who's been silenced, every wife who's been told she's nothing. You stood up, and they saw themselves in you." So Jacqueline agreed. Her first public speech took place at a women's empowerment conference. The stage was simple, the audience vast. As she stepped up to the podium, cameras flashed, but this time, she wasn't nervous. She wasn't Ambrose's shadow. She was herself. She spoke of betrayal, of sacrifice, of the nights she spent alone while Ambrose flaunted his mistress. She spoke of the fear of raising a child alone, of the pain of being dismissed as nothing. And then, she spoke of the moment she decided she would not stay silent. Her voice grew stronger as she declared, "I was told I was weak. I was told I was powerless. But women are never powerless. We carry life. We carry families. We carry entire generations on our shoulders. And when we are betrayed, we do not crumble. We rise." I rose, and so can you. The audience erupted in applause. Women stood with tears in their eyes, clapping, shouting her name. For the first time, Jacqueline felt not just victorious, but whole. Back home that evening, she sat in the nursery, now finished with her mural. She whispered to her unborn child, "You'll never grow up seeing your mother broken. You'll see her strong. You'll know that love is not about sacrifice, but about respect. And you'll know that when life tries to crush you, you can always rise." The day she gave birth was quiet and intimate. Surrounded only by Evelyn and a few close friends, Jacqueline welcomed her son into the world. She held him close, tears streaming, whispering, "We're free now." News outlets tried to capture the moment, but Jacqueline declined interviews. "This is ours," she said softly, "not theirs." Weeks later, Ambrose attempted one last desperate move. He tried to challenge the property transfers in court. But Evelyn was ready. The judge reviewed the evidence, his signatures, his fraudulent transfers, and ruled decisively in Jacqueline's favor. Ambrose lost everything. As the gavel struck, Jacqueline didn't even look at him. She didn't need to. The man who once controlled her life was now irrelevant. Months passed, and Jacqueline's design studio opened in a bright corner of Manhattan. The sign above the door read simply, "Mitchell Interiors." Clients poured in, eager to work with the woman who had become a symbol of strength. Business boomed, not because of scandal, but because of her talent, a talent she had once sacrificed, now finally free to flourish. Everywhere she went, people stopped her. Some whispered thank you, others asked for advice, many simply smiled. She had become more than the wife of a tycoon. She had become an icon of resilience. One evening, as she locked the studio and stepped into the cool night, Evelyn joined her. They looked out at the city lights, the same lights that once seemed so cold. "You did it," Evelyn said softly. Jacqueline nodded. "No, we did it. Every woman who's ever been silenced, every mother who's ever been abandoned. This wasn't just my victory, it was theirs too." Evelyn smiled. "And Ambrose?" Jacqueline shook her head, her expression calm. "Ambrose is a chapter I've closed. My story isn't about him anymore. It's about me. About my son, about the life we're building." They walked in silence for a moment, the city alive around them. Jacqueline felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a future she had written herself. And as she looked at the skyline, she whispered the words that had carried her through the storm: "We rise." And with that, Jacqueline's story closed, not in defeat, not in bitterness, but in triumph. A reminder to every viewer that no betrayal, no humiliation, and no heartbreak can silence a woman who decides to rise. So, my friends, that's how the story closes. If you're still here with me until this very moment, it must mean something in this journey has touched your heart in a personal way. Maybe you've known betrayal, maybe you've known silence, or maybe you've just carried pain that felt too heavy for too long. And if that's true, I want you to take a deep breath right now and hear this. You are stronger than you think. What Jacqueline showed us is not just drama, it's truth. Life will test you, people will disappoint you. But as Marcus Aurelius once said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. She thought she was powerless. But the moment she chose her dignity over fear, everything changed. That's not just her story. That can be yours too. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Jacqueline could have stayed broken, but she didn't. She rose. And in her rising, she gave all of us a mirror. To remember that even when life feels like it's against us, we still have a choice to rise, to heal, to rewrite our story. So maybe this isn't really about Ambrose at all. Maybe it's about you, about the storms you've walked through, about the nights you thought you couldn't make it, and the mornings you still rose anyway. That's what this story is truly about, resilience. If this touched you tonight, my dear friends, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this story. Leave a like so I know it reached you. And if you want more stories that remind you of your strength, then hit that subscribe button and stay with us. Because together, we're not just watching drama. We're learning how to rise, again and again.